Hello, friends and family, and welcome to the CMA Influencer Show. Today we're going to be working out of the 15 invaluable laws of growth and the law of an intentionality. Just give me 1 second, please, while I share this broadcast on a couple other pages. Where is it? Uh-oh. Why isn't it showing up? Well, I will have to try to share it to I'll have to try to share it later then. All right, well, let's go ahead and move it on. Hopefully, if you're in any of the other groups, you've got notifications on to watch my personal profile. And we'll go ahead and start with the law of intentionality. But first, I just want to cover a little bit about the 15 invaluable laws of growth. And I did cover it a little bit in last week's show, particularly with, that was kind of a lunch and learn. I did cover 2 laws very briefly. In the weeks ahead, we're going to be going into them a little bit further, but I want to add value to your leadership. And this is from John Maxwell's, the author's Golden Rules. So the first one is continually learn and grow is it's part of a process. And we need to look at other leaders as examples. And I know I have, just like I look at John and Zig Ziglar and many other leaders within my life. And another thing that's important to understand is that you don't have to be an expert or even a leader to understand what I'm teaching here. Everyone is in leadership because everyone has to lead themselves. There will be trials and errors, but the key is not to make the same mistakes twice, to learn from your mistakes. Your ability to become a better leader, depends on how you respond. Effective leaders are always engaged in this paradigm of that learning cycle. They learn it, and then they live it, and then they lead it. So throughout this guide, you're going to see paradigms restated as a means to remind you and your fellow leaders of how the material fits into each of these important steps in the learning process, because growth does make a difference. This is John's 3rd book. The first book focused on helping, third laws book, I should say. He's done over 100 books, but this is the 3rd laws book. And this is the first one focusing on helping leaders become better leaders themselves. The 2nd book was written to help teams develop stronger teamwork, and that's the 17 indisputable laws of teamwork. And this book was written to help individuals fulfill their potential in any situation of their life. So to discover your own purpose and potential, you need to grow in the following areas. You need to grow in your self-awareness, your character of who you are, your skills, your skill sets, your relationships, and your spirituality to give you meaning and purpose. So to grow, you'll have to put all these laws into action, not only learn them. And if you're going to go through this with me with this process, it's recommended that each of you keep a personal growth journal to track and measure your growth throughout this study. So the first law is the law of intentionality. Now, growth doesn't just happen, all right? Do you have a plan for growth? So personal growth is not a natural process in most people's lives. You have to ask the question, do you think that the building you're in right now, how can I say, in what order, did the building build itself? In what order were the parts of the building put in place? So it is a process, and it's not a natural process. You have to be intentional about it. That's the law of intentionality. So what do you think John means when he says, if you focus on goals, you may hit the goals, but that doesn't guarantee growth. If you focus on growth, you'll grow and always hit growth. So think about what the difference is between goals and growing. All right. So the growth gap traps. The first one is the assumption gap. I will automatically grow. The second one is a knowledge gap. I don't know how to grow. The third one is the timing gap. It's not the right time to grow. And the fourth is the mistake gap. I'm afraid of making mistakes. So let's cover the first one quickly, the assumption gap. If one assumes he or she will automatically grow, what is the likely outcome? How can one know if they are growing or not? Number two, the knowledge gap. I don't know how to grow. So not knowing how to grow can be a powerful reason to simply not try to grow. If one does not know how to grow, then one needs to ask those who do. So, this study is a great start to that. Number three, the timing gap. It's not the right time to begin. What happens the longer we wait to begin our journey? What are some of the reasons or excuses one might offer for the timing of personal growth not being right? You may want to get a piece of paper out and list those. List the reasons, excuses why the timing might not be right to grow. And you'll find that they don't really have all that much substance. And ask yourself, what do you think about the idea of starting your journey, even though you're scared and unprepared? And you may not know where it's going, but at least you're growing. The fourth gap is the mistake gap. I'm afraid of making mistakes. So remember, growing is not always a clean and neat pursuit. There was a question by Robert Schuller. It says, what would you attempt if you knew you would not fail? Once we decide to grow, we must expect mistakes and welcome them as a sign that we are moving in the right direction. I love one of Zig Ziglar's quotes is, failure is an event, not a person. Yesterday ended last night. So we learn from our mistakes, because if we're not making mistakes, we're not risking enough. All right, what's the next one? So the growth gaps, the perfection gap, the inspiration gap, the comparison gap, and the expectation gap. So let's cover the first one, the perfection gap here. I have to find the best way before I start. So where the mistake gap says I can't move out of fear of making a mistake, the perfection gap says I will move only when I have the perfect plan. Both of these gaps are simply excuses for not starting at all. The best plans for growing happen as we grow, not before we grow. The inspiration gap says, I don't feel like doing it. So out of all the gaps, this is the one that requires a simple decision. Will I do it or not? The truth is, the major difference between those who do it and those who don't do it is those who do it, do it. Feelings are unreliable, and action will make the difference. You're more likely to act yourself into feeling than feel yourself into action. So do you get that? You're more likely to act yourself into feeling, then feeling yourself into action. You need to take action even when you don't feel like it. How many pages could you fill with the excuses to not start growing? Okay. Now, the next one, the comparison gap. Others are better than I am. There's two truths about others. There will always be someone better, and rejoice for the better ones. For you'll learn from those out in front of you. Don't look at those out in front of you as deterrents, but as those that you can learn from. Someone may be looking at you, the better, as better, behind you. So just watch out for that comparison gap. Don't compare yourself to others, and those that are out in front of you, look to them to learn from them, and those that are behind you, look to help them learn from you. And the last one, definitely not least, is the expectation gap. I thought it would be easier than this. So let's see here in my slides. Do I have? Oh, I don't have it. The expectation gap. Let me see. No, I don't have that. There's a kind of a little formula, it says that there's a paradigm that says what is luck is usually not luck. It's usually, the preparation, the growth, plus your attitude, plus the opportunities that you're presented with, plus action equals luck. So if Rome was not built in a day, how long are you willing to give yourself to grow? It starts with that preparation. And this study is in this chapter is part of that preparation. Then attitude, opportunity plus action, then it'll equal your luck or your results. All right. So let's live it. So start making your plan now. So making the transition to intentional growth. So these are some of the big questions that we need to ask ourselves. So where do you want to go in life? What direction do you want to go? What's the farthest you can imagine going, and how long will it take? Not having all the answers to these questions immediately is normal, but ask them and keep exploring them every day. Do it now. So, don't use the word someday, as it strikes. Is do it now, do it now, do it now. Now is the best time to start anything. Face the fear factor. Fear of failure. Fear of trading security for the unknown. Security is a let's see. There's a security myth, and there's fear of being overextended on resources, on time, money, and energy. There's fear of what others might think. And there's fear that success will push others away. But ask yourself, which emotion is stronger? The desire to change and grow, or one of these fears? Oh, sorry, I missed that. So it's a good question to ask there, It's in Jordan Peterson's self-authoring program. He has you write about your past, present, and future. And in the future authoring, he writes, you need to write what will happen if you do the things you have to do to become the person you want to be and to have the things you want to have. He also then asks you to write down what your future would look like if you didn't do the things that you had to do to be the person you wanted to be and to grow and have the things you didn't want. It helps you give you that stark contrast. Which emotion is stronger, the desire to change and grow, or those fears, those results that you don't want to have to happen. All right. So this is a little exercise for you that you can do. If anyone wants this little worksheet, just send me a message and I can send it to you. It's good to go through. So you kind of go through and you rate yourself on the chart, and you place an X on the chart to show where you see yourself right now in each of these life trajectories. Plans to start tomorrow, or insist on starting now, waits for the growth to come, or you take responsibility to grow. So it's from accidental growth to your intentional growth. Ooh. And that is basically, no. And just in review, so lead it. So when you live this law, the law of intentional growth, you will show others the way, and they empower them to learn it and to live it too. So remember, applying the law of intentionality to your life, review the gaps and ask yourself which of these gaps has presented the greatest challenge for you. I'm going to go back really quick. So let's look at the gaps. Let's see here. So in the assumption gap, so which one, I'm going to just review the gaps very quickly. Which one presents the biggest challenge for you? The assumption gap, I will assume I will automatically grow. The knowledge gap, I don't know how to grow. The timing gap, it's not the right time to grow. The mistake gap, I'm afraid of growing. The perfection gap, I have to find the best way before I can start growing. The inspiration gap, I don't feel like growing. The comparison gap, others are better than I am. And the expectation gap, I thought it would be easier. So take some time to write out a growth plan to address each area above, and to take the step today to grow. Look at your calendar over the next year. Schedule specific timed and focused growth plans. If you think you don't have time to schedule something else, imagine what last year could have looked like if you had scheduled plans for growth. Remember, growing is not a goal, but a lifelong process that must start with being intentional. While scheduled growth time, may seem simplistic, it is the beginning of action and intention. I've covered this a little bit before, particularly from Hal Elrod, and he wrote The Miracle Morning, in studying some of the most successful people in the world, and he came up with the acronym SAVERS, which gives you 6 recommendations of a routine in the morning that the most successful people follow. And one of the R's in that acronym SAVERS is reading. So even if you just schedule 20 or 30 minutes of reading every day in an area of growth, that's part of your plan there. That's a plan for growth. Formal education is pretty good and it seems to open doors, but it doesn't always teach you exactly what you need to be successful in life, particularly about relationships and communication. So that would be my recommendation. So next week, join me again at 1 p.m. and we're going to be covering the next chapter book, The Law of Awareness. And if no one has any questions, hey, JM, Nicholas, and Sveti, thank you for joining. And bless you all. Have a wonderful week and join me next week. All right. Bye.